Hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are expanding on last week's episode. If you guys know me, sometimes I plan things and I'm extremely ahead on things, and I have this whole vision of everything I want to do with all the nuts and bolts figured out. And other moments, I think on my feet and I make decisions, and after that, I commit and I figure out the pieces later, which also I will say is a part, in my opinion, of what I think makes successful entrepreneurs, which are people who don't need all the nuts and bolts to move. And so, in the midst of last week's episode, I was dropping all the value bombs that I had learned as the client side in my own coaching and realized that I just have so much more to share and I didn't want to rush through it. I didn't want to have you sit for 2.5, 3 hours in one episode. And so we decided to do a part 2 of what I learned on the client side of my experience. For a little bit of context, first of all, make sure that when you are listening to today, if you have not listened to part 1, go back to part 1. You will see it if you literally scroll back one episode. Part 1 is where we really start to cover all of the initial aspects that I learned when I went to Montana. So I went to Montana for my own coaching. I went to Montana to develop my own business, to be on the client side of things. And that process for me taught me so many things, both personally and professionally. And last episode, we covered a lot of different downloads that I got, and I just have a lot more notes of stuff that I want to cover. So without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty, shall we, of the absolute gems that I learned from my time in Montana. One of the things that was, I feel, not only taught, but also caught when I was in Montana was leadership. And I think a lot of the time, in my opinion, especially when people are starting their business or growing their business, I would probably even say up to 7 figures or so. I don't think that there's enough emphasis on people actually desiring to understand or to develop their leadership skills. And I think it is such a missed opportunity because the leadership that I saw, there was a quote that, again, I'm going to butcher, which is why I'm going to have George on at some point. But there was a quote that was shared with me that was really a matter of leadership is not a matter of telling people and trying to force them to get to where you are. It's a matter of meeting and understanding where they're at and giving them the tools to be able in their own autonomy to get to where you are. And it really is like leadership is about empowering other people on your team, not necessarily bringing them up to your level. And so the aspect of meeting them where they're at, I think is the biggest takeaway that I had. So I went to Montana, and in that, I, in my mind, had this like mental agenda. Like I did the classic analytical type A thing where I had pages of brain dumps and I was like, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. And would start to kind of brain dump all the things that I was like, this is my agenda or my itinerary. And when I say that basically got thrown out the window, because I had this huge document and I thought that was going to be the guiding force of everything that we did. And truthfully, we barely even looked at it. And it was the biggest blessing, actually, because I think a lot of the time, again, I could have gone into that and he could have said in the session, okay, well, Kate wants to talk about ABC, so I'm going to let her drive the bus. And instead, he came in, did an assessment of me. It was kind of like, hey, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. We're going to kind of get like a little bit of a current state situation going on. Once I understand what your current state is, then I will kind of build our itinerary from there. And I will be honest, and I would say this to George too, I thought like, there's no plan here. This is just going to be like a free flow. Like I was like, my anxiety was through the roof because I was like, I have X amount of days here. I want to make sure that I get boom, 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 all of these things covered. And it was the biggest blessing. And it really for me was because he was meeting me where I was at. And for myself, I realize now reflecting back that I needed somebody to do that because I was living in the future to not have to deal with current state. And what I mean by current state is I didn't really necessarily want to have to really, really unpack. I was like future planning. Like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to achieve. Here's the next milestone. Boom, boom, boom. And I think it was really insightful to have somebody to really, really unpack and say, hey, I know that that's your goal. And like, I see you, I validate you. Like, I get it. But also, let's reverse engineer from there because I need to understand where you're at right now in order to be able to help you to get to where you're going. And so I think the aspect of building the vision as a result of that was not from this place of like, I want to make $7 million a year and like, here's how we're going to do that. It was more from the place of what are the things that are happening right now in the business? What are the situations that are coming up? And like that becomes our number one focus because ultimately it's the solving of those items that's going to help you to get to where you want to go. And so after Montana, we came home, and by fluke, actually, my coach was here a week later. And so we all ended up connecting with some other entrepreneurs as well. And so they were also someone who had done an intensive with him. And so we were just kind of spitballing and sharing some insights. And it was interesting because the woman that I was speaking with was also saying the exact same thing. She was like, I had pages and pages of all of these things that I thought I was going to cover. And then she's like, I come in and like, we're barely even really referencing it or touching it. And so it made me wonder, what's the move here? What's the strategy here? And I think this is just such a testament of meeting people where they're at. And I think the important thing to recognize is meeting them where they're at means that also it's not always consciously where they know they are. And I think that is the real takeaway that I had, which is for her, this lady was sharing her experience with me, but also for myself, it wasn't a matter of the fact that I knew that I needed that. I didn't think or consciously know that I needed that. It was him assessing as a leader, reading the room, reading and understanding where everybody was at mentally, emotionally, strategically, and making a judgment call to say, hey, this is actually where you're at. In his mind, he's saying to himself, this is where she's at. This is what she's going through. This is how I'm going to approach it. And so looking back on it now, on the other side of the experience, I was like, what a beautiful testament to the original message, which was it's not about bringing people up to where you are and saying, okay, like this is what I want to cover. Here we go. It was a matter of meeting me where we are. And so where I was in a place of indecision. I was in a place of a lot of, emotional things that happened, and it had been a trying year. And so we talked a little bit about that, and that was never on my agenda. And meanwhile, that was a huge umbrella over what had happened in business that year, right? In the sense of like what I had experienced and how I navigated business and all of the things. And so I think that the number one thing that this taught me was that we need somebody to show and lead us from the front. And when you do that, it creates such a place of safety for other people to let their guard down. And it also was testament that maybe you, or like I, am potentially at times hiding in the logistics. We're hiding in the plans. We're hiding in the steps. We're hiding in these, I'm going to do this in this time. And it's like, yeah, but how are you right now? Right? Like in this moment, how are you right now? And when you're talking about the future of like, I want to do this in the next 2 years, this next 5 years, and like you will, and you can do that, but like, how are you doing right now? Him meeting me where I was at, for me, turned into a lot of emotional release, a lot of personal healing, a lot of actually recentering on the big picture and not getting into the nitty-gritty plans. And also recognizing that when you go into planning for a business, it is not just about putting pen to paper. It's about actually understanding the depth and the why. And so I think rarely do we have a lot of conversations when we're thinking about strategy, right? When you think about asking someone of like, okay, what do I do for my marketing? Or what should I do for my sales? Or what should I do for this offer? You're really asking someone for the steps. And I think the most important thing with this is that I really learned in moments where I was hiding in the steps that I really needed to shift back into understanding how I was thinking and understanding my thought process around it more than anything else. And so the leading and getting people to where you are was also really seen for me with his other clients as well, because they were also sharing testament that they were going through things and they went into their intensive with no agenda of covering them. And that actually ended up being the biggest transformation for me. And so we all shared that in our coaching, one of the biggest downloads and one of the biggest highlights was what we weren't looking for. And I think that that really is good leadership. Good leadership is helping people to see what they don't see in themselves and also in what they have the ability to do. And so not only learning this motto of his, but also seeing him embody it through strategy in the work of the intensive and also in the personal work that he does with his clients was really profound, actually, and made me realize and reflect that maybe in some instances, I have been leading from my agenda. I have been leading from, oh, well, I see this, so I'm going to do boom, boom, boom with them. And the question that you really, and I need to ask myself more of, frankly, is, are they ready for that? And I think this aspect of knowing, like with your clients or with yourself, just because someone could do it for you doesn't mean you're ready for it. And I've had a lot of situations in my business where I have had people who have told me advice, who have given me next steps and given me direction. And frankly, I wasn't ready to hear it. And so I think there's this aspect of not only what the message is that the person needs to receive, but also then asking yourself, is this person even ready to receive this message? And I think that extra filter is really important, because the other line that came up with leadership was, leadership is basically the ability to say the same thing over and over until the person gets it. And I think we oftentimes have this belief that when we say something to people, we assume that they just digest it. And frankly, on the other side, I may or may not have low-key like ADHD or something like that. I'm questioning it all the time, because I definitely lose parts of information. But for myself, when someone says something to me, sometimes I do need it repeated 3-4 times. And honestly, sometimes I need it repeated 14 times. And that's because there's two aspects, which is they may not hear the message in the way in which you intended it. And two, they may not be ready to receive it. Think, in another analogy, right? Like, I've had moments in my life where I was super fit and that I was going to the gym nonstop. And I also had moments where I wasn't. And so when someone be like, yeah, you gotta go to the gym, you gotta go to the gym, you gotta go eat healthier. I'm like, I know that. But it was hearing it in a different context at a time where I needed it and where I was ready to hear it, that I actually was like, oh, okay, this is a message that I'm ready to receive and therefore ready to take action on. It's not that when people told me earlier that I didn't physically hear them. It was like I didn't hear it, i.e. digest it, because I wasn't in a state to hear that. I wasn't ready to do something about it. And so you may at times find that you're like, why did this take me so long to do X? Why do I feel like I had to hear this 17 times before I did something? And that's because honestly, you weren't at the time consciously ready to receive that information or to do something about that once you heard it. And so I think with leadership, it was really such a sign of the work that we're really here to do. And the work that we're really here to do, frankly, is not about us at all. It's about other people, and it's about understanding where they are, understanding how they need to be spoken to, understanding the ways in which they digest information, and really understanding them is how we're going to understand what we need to do. And so I think a lot of the time in traditional leadership coaching, there's a lot of leadership around, okay, like here's who you are and here's who, like, understanding your leadership style and how you communicate and how you do this. All of that is based off of, though, your team, your clients, your audience, your community, etc. And so I think it's just such a testament of what true leadership is, which is leadership is really understanding and getting a curiosity about those that you're trying to impact and using that as your guide rather than, hey, I'm going to kind of build my avatar of who I am as a leader and that's just who I'm going to be. Now, the second one that I said I want to put a pin in, but I want to come back to, this comes up now in, well, basically every day, because it really does apply to many different areas of your business. So the quote being, and by the way, if you guys follow George, and his handle will be in the show notes for you, if you follow George, he has what he calls scripture statements. Scripture statements at its basic essence are really one-liners or phrases or terms that he uses consistently that are basically planting of seeds of his brand into your brain. And so I would hazard to guess, actually, by the end of today's episode, you're probably going to have a lot of those different scripture statements noted down. But one of the most impactful ones for myself, not only professionally, but also personally, was your message is only as effective as your recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it, most importantly, without you. Okay, so I'm going to say it one more time. Your message is only as effective as the recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it without you. Let's unpack. Because the first thing that this did for me was marketing. Because oftentimes we're like, I have said this 15 times in marketing. You may even think I've said this 15 times to a client. And you're like, I am saying this over and over. Why are they not getting it? And you saying it to a client, to your marketing, to whatever it may be, is not the same as them actually hearing it and understanding it and doing anything about it. And so to me, I think it really broke down the responsibility that we have when it comes to communication. And this is in marketing when you're talking about your offer, when you're talking about your pain points. And you're like, but I'm talking about it. Yes, you may be, but the way in which you're talking about it may make no sense to the consumer. And so because of that, they're not digesting it, which is why they may not be taking the actions that you want. Your team, you may be saying something to Sarah, who you feel like, okay, I've told Sarah this 4 times. How is she not getting it? And the question becomes, are you saying it the same time, like the same way? And so, for example, is it like purple, purple, purple over and over? Or is like, hey, she actually needs to hear it in a green lens in order for her to digest it. And yet you say it in purple 15 more times. And so the question becomes, is it actually the fact that Sarah can't digest the message, or is it actually the fact that the message is not being communicated effectively? And so communicated effectively means that it needs to be communicated in a way in which she digests it and where it activates her. And so when it comes to getting messages through to your audience, to your team, to your clients, it's not a matter of I did it, I said it, they should know. Just because you said it doesn't mean they digested it. And again, I think the reason that is because some of us can digest things in different learning styles. Some people are auditory, some people are written, some people are visual. There's also the aspect, as we talked about, of when you're saying a message to someone, are they even ready to receive it, i.e. in a primed state to be ready to do anything about it? And is the way in which you're talking about it actually helping them to do it without you? And we see this a lot when it comes to programs actually and coaching, because oftentimes in coaching or consulting, when people are helping one another or helping their clients, they create like modules, they create trainings, and they'll be like, Kate, this is so simple. Like I clearly outline it in the training and I say, boom, boom, boom. And then I go in and I watch it and I'm like, I barely got a grasp of it. Right. And I've been in business for years and this is literally what I do day in, day out. And so it to me was this idea that there's only one way to digest something and that just because you said it should mean that it lands. And I think that this quote of your message is only as effective as someone can receive it is really how you want to start to assess your messaging, whether it is with your marketing, your clients, or your team. If you're saying something that's yes, okay, we want to make sure we're communicating it effectively, but also then the question becomes, is it being digested? Is it being acted on? And if it's not, it's actually your job to go back to the drawing board. It's your job to go back to your marketing. It's your job to change your modules and change your downloads and your worksheets and your offers. It's your job to better understand how you can support your team in a way that they will understand and that they will digest. And so I think this idea that just because we say something means it's done, check the box, we're moving on. This was such an insight as well, personally for me, truthfully, because I realized that there were certain even friendships where I was sharing things and I was saying things and I'm like, how is so-and-so like, I literally told you this. I literally told you. Like I'd be like, how did so-and-so not remember this or not go through this? And it's because the way in which I communicated it was not something that they actually digested. And so this is, I think, where a lot of miscommunication comes from. And with that, a lot of the miscommunication can lead to a lot of problems, not only personally, but also in business. We just assume because someone heard something physically that they digested it. And so the same thing would be true when it comes to raising kids, right? If you have kids and you're trying to get a message across, you just simply saying it versus them hearing you are two different things. And so the last portion of doing it without you is really where the biggest impact comes in business. Because if you want someone in your offer to take action without you, if you want your team to take action without you, they have to not only understand the message, but also understand the message in a way that they can independently act on it. And so I think that's another layer, because just simply understanding what I say is one thing, but taking that, understanding it, integrating it, and being able to act on it without me is the next tier, the next filter that we need to get through. And so I think when you're really looking to say, okay, well, how do I create change? How do I create change and a movement in my marketing? How do I create change and a movement and great results with my clients? How do I make sure that my team feels completely independent and supported, but also understands my expectations or my standard of what I'm looking to see happen, but can also feel confident to kind of have some independence to do it on their own? All of that is going to come from the way in which your message lands, the way you structure it, the way you communicate it, the effectiveness of how you do that. And so I love this quote. And I actually joke now a little bit with this quote, because I will be like, someone will say like, you didn't say that to me, or I'll say, you didn't say that to me. And the response now is, your message is only as effective. And it's like, okay, I know. So it's really a constant reminder of the fact that communication is a constant work. Another thing that was a really, really good conversation that I just really wanted to highlight was that most people spend 90% of their time getting a customer and 10% on delivery, when really it should be us spending 10% getting a customer and 90% on delivery. And this actually kind of coincides with another quote or another scripture statement, which was the fact that businesses are not built on acquisition or getting clients, but they're actually built on retention and keeping clients. So these two kind of coincide for me because I think it really is true. There's so many businesses that are so focused on the marketing and the selling. And like you may even, just as I have been a victim to this in the sense that you felt really taken care of. You felt really cared for when it came to when you were buying, when you were taking out your credit card. But then as soon as you took out your credit card and you became a client, there was kind of this, oh, like you felt this drop in energy. And I think the time that people have spent on their marketing is fine. If you want to spend a lot of energy on marketing, you should. You need to know marketing, you need to know sales, but we also need to make sure that we're way outweighing that when it comes to the delivery. And so one of the conversations was that your offer should really be 10 times in value what you're charging for it. So like if you're charging, even let's just say it's $100, your value of that should be 10 times that, right? So if you're going to go into the thousands for $100 offer. And so you really want to look at when you are creating the price point of an offer, when you're also creating the offer itself, we want to be really conscious of the fact that like, yes, we're marketing it in a certain way, but we also want to then say, okay, well, what does the delivery look like? And I myself have been let down when I've, gone and purchased offers. I feel like I joined, I was like, oh, this is it. I kind of felt like as soon as I became a client, the experience actually became worse than it became better. And I also think that one of the benefits of taking care of clients and really making that your top priority. And when I say taking care of clients, I mean the selling process to the onboarding, to the welcoming of them as a client, to the first kickoff, to the touch points throughout the container, through what they need when they're in a time of crisis, everything. People spend more on their reels and TikToks than they do on making videos for their actual clients, the people who are already paying them. And so I think that we need a recentering. We need a little bit of a reality check that if you want to scale your business, it's not going to be about signing 20 new clients, 50 new clients constantly. It's what if you could have 20 new clients who then re-sign and those become your 20 new clients because they stayed in your container. And so even for myself, one of the big things that we push with a lot of people is actually focusing on the delivery aspect, focusing on the onboarding, the actual client delivery, the offboarding, the accountability, the planting of the principles. All of those are things that we talk about in delivery. And the reason that we do that is because you will have such an easier time when you have retention, when you have renewals in your offer. Not to mention when people get results, guess what happens? They actually tell other people, oh my gosh, you need to join this offer. You need to be in this mastermind. You need to buy this course, whatever the offer is. They will start to become your little speakerphones everywhere that tell people, hey, get inside, get inside. If people don't get results because they don't feel supported, they're not going to renew and they're not going to refer. And so the best marketing, I would say, is actually serving your clients. Because when you, like a lot of our business comes from people who say, hey, you should work with Kate. You should go into ITI. Or someone who says, hey, I want to sign for my 3rd year with you. Is that okay? Yeah, absolutely. Like having people stay and renew because we can continue to help them, and having a good customer experience for people and good results for people allows them to advocate for us and for our program. And so when you think about scale, if you think about scale at I'm at $100,000 a year and I want to go to 200,000, or I'm at 200,000 and I want to go to 5, or 5 to a million, or million to 2 million, whatever it is. When you want to grow, it can't just be more posts. It can't just be more marketing, because frankly, you have this revolving door. What we're looking to do is we're looking to create repeat customers. We are looking to create LTV, or better known as lifetime value of a customer, which is how much one customer spends inside of your world. And so I think we have to recenter ourselves when we think that, marketing, yes, is like extremely important, but is it more important than your clients? And if you didn't, which is kind of the assessment that I look at, if you didn't change anything about your marketing and you continue to market the way that you are right now, could you simply in your business look at the current clients that you have in your world through renewals, referrals, etc.? Could just actually creating a better client experience allow you to have a bigger business? And I will help you and guide you along the way. It can. There has been times where we have had times where we were on Instagram, we changed nothing, and within a year, we doubled our business. We changed nothing about how much we were posting. We changed nothing about what platforms we were on. We were literally on the same places, making the same amount of content, and we doubled our business. And so the reason we were able to do that though is because we kept up with the same amount of stuff, but we also had increased our customer experience. We have more retention, we have more renewals, we have more upsells, and we have more referrals. And so it already in itself, we maintained the front end of marketing, but we also had a lot more renewals and referrals, and it helped us to literally double our business in 1 year. Okay. The next thing that was also a really easy classification was what George calls the 4 paths to the peer. And these are the 4 pathways that you probably indirectly, I would say, probably have experienced or interacted with, but I think it's a very clear way to be able to break down understanding for you of what's happening in your audience at a given moment. And so I'm going to kind of explain. Number 1 is people who are going to bounce. Okay. So I'm going to list out the 4. Bounce, number 1. Number 2, learn more. Number 3, opt in. And number 4, buy. Okay. So bounce, learn more, opt in, and buy. And so when we were going through this, a lot of the time we talk about a customer's journey in the sense of all the different milestones they're going to go through. And so when we first look at bounce, the first thing that I instantly thought of when he was kind of outlining these and chatting through them together was the fact that bounce, I think, is something that a lot of people don't even recognize can happen. Yes, someone can find you, not follow you, not decide to, engage with your content and be like, hey, this person's not for me. And frankly, if we really think about what you're trying to do as a mission in a community and also what you're trying to do with your offers, you don't necessarily want people in your community who don't resonate with you, your message, your principle, your mission. And so I do think that the bounce aspect is something that people just kind of can't fathom in the sense of we don't really consider how many people find us and just are not interested or don't continue. And so I want you to think about somebody shouts you out and they share a story of yours and they're like, hey, still resonate with this, and they share it with their audience. Their audience may go to your profile and be like, this is interesting, but I don't really want to follow her. Okay, moving on. And so that's a person who would bounce. It's somebody that basically sees you and is exposed to you and your brand and your business, but ultimately at the end of the day, opts to not participate and also not continue down the relationship with you. And something that George talks about a lot is the fact that relationships beat algorithms. And so the word relationship kind of integrates into many different areas, both in marketing and in client delivery. And I think that the way that I thought of this as an analogy is kind of like there's aspects of you see somebody on a dating app and you don't swipe. That's somebody who's bounce. Then you've got the next one, which is the learn more, which is where they do swipe for you. And now you kind of have an aspect of connection, but you're not connected at all. The next one is you're actually dating and you're going on a date. And then the last one being you're official or you get married and kind of going through these stages. And so I for myself, that's how my brain works. I always think about these in analogies. And so I kind of thought about each of these in that way. So the first one being bounce, i.e. someone can see your quote unquote dating profile and not swipe for you. And the same thing is true when it comes to your business. So that's kind of number 1. Number 2 is going to be learning more, which is your content. This is people who basically consume the information that you have on social media, that you have anywhere, but they're not taking a commitment with you. They're basically consuming from the outside. They're kind of passively consuming you. They may watch your stories, they may consume your posts, but they're not taking the next level of any kind of commitment to you. They're just consuming what is naturally available in a public sense. And so when we come to the learn more aspect, the thing that I really liked about the conversation we had about these was the fact that I think we also need to normalize not every single person in your audience is going to buy from you. And assuming that is so in the ego, it's not even funny. Because someone watches your story, because somebody simply sees your profile or happens to see something on your page, doesn't necessarily mean that they are somebody who wants to go to the next level with you. And so it's the same, again, let's go back to the analogy of if you do swipe for somebody and then you start to kind of see a little bit more of them and get to know them a little bit more, you may not necessarily want to go to the next step. That's okay. And so I think with another coach of mine, I had said I really wanted to focus on impact. I was I just want to know, how do I impact more people? And one of the ways that he kind of reframed things for me was the fact that he was your content is impact. This idea that impact has to be connected to income in the sense of I can only impact if this person cha-ching pays A, B, or C price. You can impact people with your podcast. You can impact people with your stories, with your TikTok, with your Instagram. You can impact people with what you create every single day. And this idea that we have to charge in order to impact people is not the case. So if impact is actually your goal, and this is where the truth is going to shine, if impact is actually your goal, then you can do that with your marketing. And the main thing here is it means that even if someone never buys anything from you, that's totally okay, because the goal was impact. It was not only income in the way that we're creating things. And so I think it's important when we look at the learn more stage, i.e. people kind of getting to know us and kind of feeling out who we are and what we stand for, you need to recognize that some people will always consume your content and they will never buy from you. And frankly, I do this. And you do this. You may listen to this podcast every single week and be like, oh, I'm never going to work with Kate. I just like the podcast. Okay, perfect. And for me, I do the same thing. I listen to so many different podcasts and I have no idea what they offer. And I've never even looked into their offers because I just like the content. It's impacting me. And so it's okay. That's also important though, for you to give as permission to your audience to not assume that every single person in your world is a customer who's ready to buy from you. Just because they consume doesn't necessarily mean that they will be a customer. Now, third is going to be the opt-in person, in the sense of the fact that someone who wants to take your relationship to the next level. So this could be somebody who opts in for your emails. It could be somebody who ends up subscribing to your podcast. It could be somebody who follows you on YouTube. It could be somebody who follows us on Instagram. They're people who take a aspect and a small micro decision of commitment to us is really what we're trying to get at here. And so with the people who opt in, they're basically going down to the next phase of getting invested into you. And so this place is something where you have your next tier of community. Again, still impact, but closer toward the aspect of buying from you, less than just consuming. And so even if, which is again, another thing we need to consider, even if someone downloads a freebie, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to become a client. Can we create opportunities or invitations for them to become clients? Absolutely. And sure, and you should. But does it mean that because someone downloads your lead magnet or downloads your mini course or just subscribes to your YouTube that, oh, okay, like they're ready to move? No. There are people who are going to be taking the next level of commitment with you in those ways. But it's important to recognize that that really is a symbol of their commitment level with you and not necessarily a matter of your timeline, which we're going to get to in a second here, of understanding the timeline of customer journey. The last one being the most obvious one, which is buy, or which are the people who not only consume from you, but they also purchase from you. And so they're the people who become your clients. So again, going back to the four, which are some of our audience is going to bounce. Some of our audience or the people who will come to us are just going to stick in our content bucket and they're just going to learn more and consume us. The next are going to opt in, take a little bit more of a commitment with us, subscribe to your channel, opt into your lead magnet, kind of get a little bit closer into your world, a little bit more commitment. And then you've got that full commitment, that marriage, if you will, which is the stage 4, which is going to be the buy. And so these 4 paths to the peer, which is what George calls it, are basically the 4 different experiences that someone can have in your world. And so it is, yes, possible to have somebody go from content to opt-in to client. Absolutely. We see it all the time. But I think what was, really valuable about this conversation to me was the fact that just because there are stages of the buyer process doesn't necessarily mean that we should have an expectation that every single person has to go through those or something is broken. And so it was the reframing that you can have people who just consume your content, and that is entirely okay because they don't necessarily all have to become your clients. And I think in a day and age where marketing is extremely transactional, if we're going to be really honest about it, there is just such this aspect of, oh, if you engage with me, like you better buy. If I give you this, or I go live, this is something I see all the time. Like if I go live and I answer questions, people are like, where are the clients? Where are the clients? And I'm like, oh, no, you were supposed to go live just to help people, So it was because of the content bucket. It was because of the learn more bucket. It wasn't necessarily a commitment level to you. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize and honor our audience and honor the people who get exposed to us, to recognize that they may be all at different stages and therefore need different things. Okay, customer journey, I'm going to very briefly discuss because I want George to come talk about this. Because frankly, he's going to talk about it 10 times better than I ever will. And he just can flow on this for hours. But one of the things that he kind of broke down for me were the different stages of customer journey. And the main takeaway that I wanted to share with you was the fact that with customer journey, and basically what I mean by that, by the way, because I know that sometimes when people hear customer journey, like, what does it even mean? It basically means the stages of how someone goes throughout your world. So a little bit different than the 4 paths of the peer. Basically, it's the stages or the way that someone progresses through your world and understanding what it is that they need at each of those stages in order to help them to get to a level or aspect of commitment. So the 4 paths to the peer is a little bit more of the 4 different ways that you can see experience in your world, whereas my understanding of the customer journey was really a little bit more of the process of how we can understand how people move throughout. We've got some really good stories actually that we can share on the customer journey one with George. So I'm gonna share this at a later date. So stay tuned for that episode. But when covering customer journey, the biggest takeaway that I had was that really you want to keep in mind when someone is going through your world, there is this aspect of what is consciously going on, i.e. what they think they're looking for, what they think they're doing. And then there's also this aspect of the subconscious, which is what they're looking to have as like an activation inside for them to move forward. So for example, logistically, someone may be investigating you and your services, and they're looking at your website, your testimonials, your product 101, your program 101, but underneath, they're really looking for permission, right? They're looking for the permission that they need to reach out. Or say you are in a DM conversation with somebody, or you're in a sales consultation with somebody, and that's the part of the process that you're at. It's important to remember that when you're selling to somebody, that this is actually much more a matter of safety. People need to feel safe in order to be able to move forward and to feel that they can take the next step with you after the sales process. I had a situation actually where myself and another one of my male peers, we actually had a consult with the same person. And it was really interesting because we were just kind of chit-chatting and they're like, oh, I have a consult with so-and-so actually. And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. I have a consult with so-and-so. So anyways, we have these consults and he says, listen, it went okay, but we'll see, what kind of ends up happening. Anyway, I have a call with the same person and the person ends up signing. And so I kind of sat back and thought to myself, okay, well, why do I feel that happened? What do I feel was the difference maker? And it could be the brand and it could be all of these things. But I actually messaged this person that signed and I said, hey, if I just was curious, like, I know you had mentioned that you were kind of doing some, coach shopping. And I'm really curious, what was the kicker for you that really made you feel that this was the right next step for you? And they said to me, honestly, on our consult, I didn't even feel that it was for a sale. I felt like you were helping me. I thought that you cared about me. And I feel like I got like literally like a blueprint of exactly what I needed to do and what we were going to do together. And I always have felt unsafe. And as soon as I heard the word, I was like, oh, I felt unsafe oftentimes investing because I could tell the person I was investing with was holding back. They weren't giving me all of the information. They were basically pulling a little bit back. Like it was giving, but it wasn't giving enough. I kind of always felt that there was like a little bit of like an ulterior motive there, or kind of like giving, but there's really no depth at all. And so because of that, they were like, I had a call with so-and-so and I couldn't invest with him because I feel that I didn't feel the security that I needed to make that big of an investment. And it was just such testament because I had literally learned this model and then had a bunch of consults when I got home because I was off the grid while I was there. And hearing this from people to say like, hey, like I didn't feel safe to move forward. I didn't feel safe to take that investment because I really truthfully didn't see like what it was all going to look like, how it was all going to come together. And because of that, I didn't feel secure to take action. And I'm like, this is such a testament to exactly what George was talking about when it comes to customer journey, which was the fact that people didn't feel safe. And frankly, even when I have made investments in the past, like I need a certain metric or a certain understanding or emotion to be felt for me to feel that I want to move. And so it's important when we're looking at the customer journey to say, how can we know, number one, on the surface, what they're seeing and what's happening, i.e. for us, it was the consults that we have with this person. But then tier two is really, okay, well, that's the conscious level. The subconscious level is that this person is looking for safety. And so how do we provide that? So again, if we think about another stage of the customer journey, it could be, for example, when someone enrolls or when someone's working with you in your service. When someone's working with you in your service, the number one thing that they're actually, yes, they're getting the logistics, they're getting the downloads, the worksheets, the modules, whatever. But truthfully, when someone hires somebody, what they're really looking for is accountability. And so that's, again, the conscious versus the subconscious. And so I'm going to have George riff on this, but I can't say enough how much of an insight it was for me and also a validation it was for me to really understand the process that people need. And I think the most accurate, but also indirectly frustrating process for a lot of business owners is the fact that the timeline of what someone needs to feel safe or the timeline of what someone needs to do their investigating into you is not always linear. We have had situations where people literally find us on social media and they buy within 48 hours. That absolutely does happen. But you also then want to ask yourself, okay, well, if someone does need more time, which phase are they stuck in, right? Or were they in a stage that they moved, i.e. say they did feel safe, and they did feel when they were consuming you that they were safe or they felt safety to inquire, but then maybe you put out a story and they're like, that rubs me the wrong way. Well, now they've gone back a step, right? And so now they want to kind of reconfirm it before they inquire. So it's a beautiful process to me because I think a lot of the time customer journey is seen as linear, which is like someone follows you, someone consumes, someone buys, and it's like boop, 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 all in one line. And I think that this was a really cool model to go through because for myself, it was such an understanding of the lack of linear that it really is. And so when we started to go through case studies of even how I came to invest into George and also how I kind of moved through his quote unquote customer journey with myself, it was not linear at all. There was like, we'll go into that on our episode, but it was not linear at all. I am literally myself as the client, a testament to the fact that customer journey is not linear. And so all of that to say, I'm really excited to have him come on about customer journey because it's going to be really, really good. Okay, the last one I want to kind of cover, and I think this applies to a lot of different aspects of your business, which is the fact that business is not about width, it's about depth. And the way that I experienced this was a couple different lenses. Have you ever consumed somebody that you feel like when they post marketing, you're like, yeah, like it's talking about XYZ, it's talking about these different topics, but I don't really necessarily feel a connection. I don't really feel like I like want to see if they posted today. I want to see if they showed up today. If you don't feel that aspect of connection, it likely has an aspect to do with the fact that they are actually not deeply connected with their audience. And because of that, you don't feel depth with them, which is why you don't feel that deep connection. You're just going for the very surface level aspect of it. The other thing that I also see with this is the depth when it comes to, truthfully, like the personal. And I met, coming home from Montana, I met some other clients of his who were absolutely incredible, just incredible people. And when I met his clients, this is kind of about Montana, but also kind of not. It was after Montana. So technically it's still through the same insight, but generally speaking, it was after Montana. And so when I met them, I was blown away. I literally sat down and I was like, why do I feel like I've known these people my entire life? And I've literally known them for like 4 hours. How is that possible? And so since then, since we met, we've had texts and calls and hung out and stuff since I met them. And I shared this with them after. And I said, hey, I also want to say, I feel like I've known you my whole life. I feel like I've known you my entire life in the way that what we talk about, how we talk about it. And so I started to ask myself, okay, well, how is that possible? Because I truthfully have had friendships in the past that never had this depth to them. And I realized that really what we're looking for in general across everything, personally, business-wise, marketing-wise, team-wise, it's not about staying at the surface and it's not about going wider. It's about going deeper. And when you go deeper, that's where the transformation happens. Like a lot of this time we assume, for example, like with marketing, we assume that if we just put out more marketing and put out more stuff, that that's simply going to be the thing that allows us to sign more clients. And I would want to ask you to sit with, is it a matter of the fact that we really need more width and just more exposure and more? Or is it actually a matter of if you had the same 5 posts and you went deeper and more intentional and more insightful with your audience, go and actually deepen the relationship with the people in your world, what would that look like? And we see this all the time. A really easy example of this, by the way, is followers. Followers are width, right? Like you can have 50,000 followers, but there's a big difference between person A with 50,000 and person B with 50,000. And the difference being the fact that if you have A or B, it is not about how many followers you have. It is about the depth of those followers. I have clients who have 30,000 followers and they get more engagement, more community, more connection than other clients that I have with 200,000 followers. And the reason that that is possible is because of the depth that they have. And I think that many businesses are losing on depth. We're losing on depth because we are just kind of like blanket across everything. I want to have just more exposure, more clients, more. And when you do that, you're losing the intimacy. And the intimacy that you have with your audience and with your brand and with your community, just like I felt with these people that I first met, can be the same experience that you create with people who find your podcast, who find your socials, who find your Instagram, who find whatever, right? And so that depth can still exist in a social format. And so I was like, how can we translate what I felt meeting this person for the first time and instantly feeling, as I said, safe, secure, seen, heard, validated. Like all of it was just like, oh, this person gets me, right? How do I create that on social media? And the number one thing is depth. We're not sharing actual deep conversations. We're not being authentic and truly vulnerable and sharing things that are actually our truth and our reality. We are being at some point superficial in doing things for social media without actually thinking, does this make sense to me? And what do I believe to be true about this? And I think we're also getting extremely automated and transactional, right? Like we're losing on depth because we're trying to put everything into being a system. And by trying to make it quote unquote scalable, we've lost the spark of what makes it so great when it does have true depth. We're going and making it wider because we're making it into a system, and we're losing the depth. And as a result, we're losing the results that depth can create. So I really think more than anything, going through this entire process has been honestly just so many downloads. And I'm sure we're going to probably do a couple episodes with George because there's lots to do. And we also want to make sure that you have good, nice 1 hour chunks for your drives, your walks, and all of the things. But I really want to share more than anything that I think the reason I wanted to give all of this to you and kind of share my insights with you is I think it's always important to stay the student. And I have had a lot of really great success in our business. I'm very proud of what we've done. I'm very excited for all the things we've achieved. But honestly, the number one skill that I never, ever, ever want to lose is the fact that I want to be the stupidest person in the room. I want to have no idea what everybody's talking about. And I want to be just there with my paper and pen, just writing it all down. Like I want to be, as George or his clients would put it, stretched, right? Like I want to have somebody who can get me out of my comfort zone, who can show me things that I'm not focusing on or doing. And I think it's really important that we check the ego at the door. A lot of what we covered was some new for me. And a lot of it, truthfully, was really good reminders. There was a lot of good new frameworks that I did learn, absolutely. But there was also a lot of things that I needed the reminder of. And it's, again, because it was digested in a way for me because of how he communicated it. He said the message in a way that I had not heard it, in a speed or a fashion that I had never received it, which allowed me in turn to digest it in a different way. And so the reason I say stay a student is because I think this idea, I hear a lot of people who say, well, I know marketing, or I know sales, or I know whatever. So do I. But there's also a lot that I know for a fact I don't know. And so as soon as you go in to any coaching, to any business development with the assumption that you know it all, you're toast, because it means you've completely blocked off the development of what could happen. So like, even if you feel like you're doing well with your marketing, you're doing well with your offer, you're doing well with your team, this aspect of like, I'm done, you're already dead in the water when it comes to business. I am telling you, as somebody who is a multiple 7-figure earner, you are never done. You're never done. And as soon as you're done, you're toast. So you have to be looking at, how can I constantly develop? What are areas that the question is not a matter of do you know it or not? Another question would be, are you integrating it? So just because you know it doesn't mean you're doing it. I.e., I can know that I need to go to the gym doesn't mean I went to the gym today. So are you doing it? And then second, could you be looking at the same object from a different lens? And so I want you to almost think about, this is how I think about coaching. Coaching is like looking at a piece of art. One person may say, oh, I've seen this art. I've seen the Mona Lisa 15 times, right? And so like, I know what it looks like. I don't need to see it again. That's person A, who frankly is in a closed mindset and is never going to grow. Then you've got person B, who looks at that piece of art and they get coaching from someone who says, actually, you'll see the brush strokes here and you'll see this and you'll see this. And if you actually look really closely behind on the back left, you'll see this. Now that person sees the same picture, which in turn in business is the same problem, with a completely different light. And as a result, by seeing things differently, they can solve them differently. So it's an analogy that helps me to really root into what coaching is. Coaching is not a matter of I need someone to change the painting. I need somebody to show me the same painting and have me be able to see it in an entirely different light. So another analogy that I think of with coaching is that I change my glasses with each coach that I hire and each person that I work with. I'm changing the glasses I'm wearing and the lens in which I look at my problems, because the problems in the businesses remain the same. The only thing that really changes entrepreneur to entrepreneur is not necessarily that we have different problems, because all of us experience very similar problems. Let's just say you have, failed payments, right? If you have failed payments in your business, well, person A may see it one way and solve it one way, whereas person B, because of the coaching and the awareness and the insights, can see that problem in an entirely different lens. And so the reason I'm open and I talk a lot about coaching is because I don't think coaching should be this aspect of because I don't know something, I need somebody. No, you should know things, and we hope that you know things. We want you to know things. Coaching is not about lack in you. It's about the desire to develop and to expand. And so in general, this is why I always talk about coaching that I do and why I heavily invest into coaching, because I recognize that I'm not done. I'm never done. And so if you're at a place right now where you feel like you've been experiencing maybe the same problems, or you feel like you've been maybe experiencing the same reality even, maybe you're not even having massive problems. You're just kind of like, I'm just at the same place that I've always been, and I kind of just don't know how to move the needle. I want to encourage you to get curious about who might be your person to help you with that. And can you get a separate set of eyes on that? Can you get somebody who can change your lenses? Can you get someone who can help you and coach you through seeing what you need to see in that painting? You can look at the same piece of paper as me and I can see something totally different than you, just the way that I can look at a piece of paper and my coach sees something totally different than I see. So coaching, remember, is not a matter of lacking you. It is about the desire to expand and develop. And so I just want to end with that, because I think that there's a lot of really good conversations that we have about coaching and people saying, oh, well, I know that. I don't know if I quote unquote need it. The need is not about the knowledge. The need is about the thought process, the awareness, and the perspective. Do you have the thought process, the awareness, and the perspective? And if you don't, that's what's going to give you the strategy, not just the blueprint. Because truthfully, anybody on the internet can give you a blueprint. There's very few people who can effectively teach you how to think. And that's really what coaching and the best coaching is actually about. So all that to be said, you guys, thank you so much for listening today. I would also love to hear your insights on today's episode. Is there anything that really resonated with you? Maybe some scripture statements or one-liners that you're like, ooh, I'm definitely gonna be writing that one down or living by it. So I would just love to hear from you guys. If you want to shoot me a message on Instagram at Kate Perkovic or at the Ambitious account, either or. My DMs are always open. I always love chatting with you guys about your downloads of the podcast. It genuinely makes my day to get those messages and just be able to chat with how I can better serve you guys. So thank you so much for listening. And without all that being said, I will see you next week. And as always, ladies, stay ambitious.